Dum-ba-dum. KJ and Lyons, WEEI, 617-779-7937, text line 37937. We'll get to your text shortly. John, I have to apologize. They say there's no crying in baseball, but I shed a tear in that last segment just because how much Bob and Buck and the people at the Negro Leagues Museum mean to me. On a personal standpoint, it was like an honor for me to have him on, and I've known him for like 20 years.
Yeah, it's funny because I had, like I said, I did a podcast with him about a year or so, not even quite a year ago, to be honest. And then today, he really is one of the best storytellers in sports. And seeing the progress from where this is something that, okay, it was a one-room museum, if you even want to call it a museum. It was a one-room exhibit,
office,
and then it went to a museum, and now it's something that, as he said, in the gaming community, he's a household name, but so are so many of the players that are in the game are now household name. It's one of those things. I'm not trying to give a commercial here for him, but I truly enjoyed playing the Negro Leagues mode in MLB The Show last year. It was fun. I learned something, but it wasn't like I was sitting there in class learning something. It was like in a fun way. It was just really enjoyable. And I'm happy, too, because I think it's an important story to tell. And he's talked before about how the Negro League stopped in 1960. What's the legacy of it now 64 years later? It's the American spirit, right? They overcame, they weren't allowed to play. They made their own league. They overcame, and they not just made their own league, they made an elite level baseball. You look at the guys, there's Hall of Fame players in the Negro Leagues, well-deserved Hall of Famers. So,
even if you look at some of the players that would come later, your Reggie Jacksons, your Dave Parkers, your Jim Rices, all of these guys, these are who their fathers told their tales to them.
Yeah.
So that way when Jackie gets to the league, these are already things that are embedded in them. And I believe, and I've been on this soapbox before, if you want to see more young black kids playing baseball again, this is going to be the way that's done. It's through the video game. It's what baseball has been missing. Its greatest victories and the money they've made the most has when there's been a more diverse pool of talent. I'm telling you don't miss people stealing 100 bases in a season. The split screen used to be everything in baseball. Dude's got 2 feet on the carpet.
Yeah, and Bob made a great point that there's so many kids now that come to the museum because they play the game and they know who he is and they know who some of these folks are. And like I said, if I hadn't played that game mode, there were some of those guys I to this day probably wouldn't know who they were, to be honest.
Man.
And now I'm glad that I do. And it's nice to see that for the next generation of baseball fans as well.